Hello, hello. My name is Steve Giguere. I am a developer advocate for Bridgecrew by Palo Alto, and in this video, I am looking forward to showing you one of our latest developments. It is a Kubernetes validating admission controller powered under the hood by our open source infrastructure as code scanning tool, Checkov. I'm going to take you zero to hero. So I have a Kubernetes cluster set up, a repo, but no install. So let's just get started, and you can see how you can get started as well with it. Right. Few ingredients we need for this demo is a repo that we're going to try and deploy. I'm going to use this new one. You can find it at Bridgecrew.io GitHub repo called Customize Goat. And let's just do a tree and show you what that looks like. If you're familiar with Customize, great. If you're not, it's a templating system for Kubernetes YAML where you can have kind of like a class system in programming languages where we have a base deployment. It's kind of got everything we need. This particular example doesn't really have any of the best security practices, but for dev, we're just going to use that. But for prod, we've got a deployment that overrides a lot of that and applies all the best security practices. Ideally, that should go into prod, no problem. All right, we'll come back to that. Over here, I've just created a directory called wharf. There's nothing in it. And we're going to populate that and use it to deploy our admission controller. All right. Let's change gears over to here. This is the GitHub repo. It's under Bridgecrew.io Checkov, where you would find Checkov, and a subdirectory called the admission controller. And here we can find it. It's called wharf because it's kind of like a hybrid between a dock or a wharf that you would set sail on, and then also the chief of security from Star Trek Next Generation. Wharf kind of like amalgamated that together into our nickname for it. And here you can see all the install instructions. There is a step here where you have to get an API key, which means I need to go to the Bridgecrew platform. So I might as well just go straight there and kind of go through let's call it the cheater method. Now you can go to the platform, you can get an account, you can get an API key. All of these things are free. Don't think this is, I'm suckering you into paying for something. You're not. I'm not at all. So I go to the platform, I go all the way down to the bottom. You can see I did that. And I clicked on integrations. I'm going to add a new integration. And if you're familiar with the platform, you'll see that there's a new one, just there, Kubernetes Admission Controller. I click that, and it's going to take me through the easy steps to making it happen, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to call my token name for the API key I'm going to use in the admission controller. Let's call it Kate's. Oop, let's spell that right. Kate's awesome. Right, BC API key for Kate's. Nice. And just over here, there's I get my stuff out of the way. There's a create button, but that's not important. You'll see that when you do it. Okay, so I should copy this. I don't really need to, but I can if I want to paste it somewhere for safekeeping, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to see it again. But trust me, you don't need to at this point. Click next. I have to give my cluster a unique name. So I'm going to call it supercluster. The reason for that is if you have multiple clusters and multiple admission controllers configured differently for whatever reason, you need a way to identify it. Well, need for the admission controller to identify itself, but also a lot of the scan results will appear on the platform and you want to be able to tell them apart. So a unique name is key to that. So supercluster it is. Click next, and we can see we're at the final stage. And we've got some nice instructions on what we need to do to install. And this is pretty straightforward. And actually, those are the same ones which are back at the GitHub repo. So I'm going to grab this, and I missed the curl.o, but that's no big deal. I'm going to go back over here, and I'll just type curl.o, paste all that. Okay, I should have a setup.h, and I do. Amazing. All right, so I know I'm a cheater because I know the instructions. So I'm going to do a chmod to make it executable, plus x setup.h. And then I have to run the setup.h with those parameters I just created. And if you just do this, you can see .setup.h, my supercluster, and my API key. See, we didn't need to remember it. It remembered it for us, which is nice. All right, fingers crossed. If I do this, it should install into my cluster. Now the cluster that I've got is a Rancher desktop. It's brand new. My kubeconfig is pointing at it. That is important. You don't want to start installing stuff into the wrong cluster. You're probably, if you're familiar with creating certificates, you'll see, hey, this is familiar. The admission controller needs certificates to communicate to the API server, so we're automatically generating that for you, and you can create it. It's pretty straightforward. For me, I'm just going to kind of just enter whatever the city I live in. No, now you know where I live. Dev. I'll go for Bridgecrew, and let's just enter my name. All right. And again, an email address just to, be by the book. Boom. Now it's going to start creating the Kubernetes objects. These all get created in a subdirectory that you can just then delete if you want to uninstall. So it's super easy to uninstall, and it's super easy for you to check all of this into your own GitHub so you have it, GitOpsed essentially. And I'll show you what that looks like in 2 seconds. Now, it all depends whether I've got my timeout right on here. This is something I'm working on personally because this is something that I wrote. It waits 30 seconds to see if it's ready. Inevitably, you just do a get pause and you'll see whether it's ready or not. Depends on what your internet connection's like, and the fact that I'm recording a video now probably means it's not gonna work. Time to. It's fine. So I do a k get pods -a. We can see I just barely missed it. I'm just waiting for the second one to come up. The first one's ready to roll, so we can kind of just keep going now. All right, I'm gonna go back over here. And let's just do a k get pods in this window -a. Great. So I was off by a few seconds. I might go create a pull request and change that timeout to a minute. 54 seconds apparently is what I actually needed to wait for the install. Yeah, we're learning, right? So that's there now. What does that mean? All right, so what's the anatomy of my admission controller? So remember I said you're going to get a little directory. So there it is there. If I wanted to uninstall the admission controller, I could just do a k delete -f. Boom. Not going to do that. That would undo everything I've just done, which is, that's not good. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and show you what is here. So we're creating the Bridgecrew namespace. We have the admission configuration, the config deployment, a few keys that we generated along the way. You saw that. And then the service that represents it. Now, the important thing if you want to customize this is actually just this one file here. So we take a look at the Checkov config. If you're familiar with Checkov, you'll be familiar that we have config files. And you, rather than type out a whole load of parameters, you can record it into a config file so you can do it repeated over and over again. And what we're doing here is essentially turning that config file into a config map, mounting that inside our admission controller, and away we go. And we could see all the right parameters are here. We're called supercluster. And what we're doing is, by default, we're just going to use the hard fail parameter for Checkov, which means we're only going to hard fail on certain really bad things. We're not going to use the full breadth of our rule set to block things going into runtime because we're assuming that something has already gone right. We're already using the VS Code plugin to do most of the work we need. Hopefully, we've got our GitHub action, maybe using Checkov in CI to make sure that there's many, many steps before we get to this. Consider an admission controller like the bouncer in a club. The bouncer's not looking for your history, doesn't want to know if you've got issues at home. It just wants to know you're wearing the right shoes and you're not carrying a baseball bat. And that's kind of what this setup is. Now, as a security team who might be deploying this, you can change this. You can go look at all the different possible rules that we could deploy, and you could really extend this hard fail or reduce it at your leisure. But these are what we think are sensible defaults. Okay, let's clear that off. Now let's go over here, back to our customize, and let's try to deploy the bad one, shall we? All right, okay, apply. If you're not familiar with customize rather than -f, you use -k. And then it will amalgamate all of the templating for you. It's built right into kubectl. It's awesome. So then I'm going to customize my overlays and then my dev one, which I know is the bad one. Oh, I didn't create the namespace for my customized scope. There's always going to be something that catches me off when I'm doing something live. ns customize goat. Great, and we'll just try that again. Right, service is created. That was quick because the service isn't breaking any rules. It's very quick to scan a service for best practices. And now it's going to scan the full deployment, and that's taking long enough that I can tell it's not going to work because there's a lot actually wrong with it. Should take about 15 seconds, and there we go. All right, so let's unpack what we just saw. If you see this request, this line here, this is pretty standard. It doesn't matter what your admission controller is. If it fails, this is the kind of thing that Kubernetes is going to spit back to you. Everything below that is specific to this particular Checkov-based admission controller. So what we're doing is we're showing you that those policies we just looked at in the config map, only 2 of those failed. So you can see here, this one, containers should not run with allow privilege escalation. So this is, you've got a baseball bat and you're trying to get into the club. Here, minimize the admission of root containers. So we've not changed the user. We're still there as root. Nginx is a great example of this. It runs as root by default. This isn't good. It's also telling us that actually in total we had 17 issues in this manifest. Okay, so there's a lot more, and it's given us a URL to find out more. Okay, well that's good and bad. You know, it's good that there's some really bad things there, but it's also quite cool that I can come all the way back here and I can just paste this URL in here, and it's going to go directly to tell me more details about what's wrong. It's going to our projects page. What's interesting while we're waiting for that to load is we can go to our code reviews page, and I've already got that loaded here. And you can see some of my previous efforts are visible. We can look at, it treats it like a code review you would do on your desktop. So if you just run Checkov and you've got an API key, it shows up in your code reviews. And you can see I've got my supercluster runs here. And if we go over here, we'll see all the different elements that are wrong, just like you would if you'd done a scan. So I've got my supercluster, it's broken it down, and showing me the manifest that was sent. And of course, the first one, ensure CPU limits are set, is just one example of practices that we want to have correct. That was a soft fail, so we let that go, but it's definitely something we have to work on to make sure that we tick all of our security best practice boxes. So that's not too bad. Now you might be thinking, interesting. There's a few here, there's more than one. Now I'm not going to quite get into the detail on that, on how admission controllers work, but when you send a very complicated manifest like a deployment, that actually represents quite a few things to Kubernetes, like replica sets and pods. And so it breaks it all down and sends a bunch of stuff to the admission controller, which why it may look like it's multiple things in your platform. So let me just clear that up. All right, so that one failed. Now, if I get it all right, just to try and finish this off, let's try to apply the really good one, which should work, right? Let's apply -K once again, my customize, my overlays, and my prod. That's the one where I fixed everything. Now, using the same service, this is if I did it all right and went, oh no, I went back to my VS Code, I fixed everything, it's gone all the way through my pipeline, and I'm using some kind of continuous deployment mechanism to push this all in, and it's going to check it again. And it's all going to show up in my Bridgecrew, and it's going to be successful. Presto, it worked. Let's get pods-A. And once we wait 5 seconds for it to show up, we should start to see the customized goat arrive. So let me just pop back here and refresh, because I want to show you what the code reviews looks like, because we had some failures in our code reviews a second ago, and now we're actually going to have successes in our code reviews, which is good, because from a security perspective, you see we have our success there. From a security perspective, we want to see both that the admission controller is working, whether it's rejecting or accepting or whatever. That's all got to still be there. And there's my customized goat. You can see the containers are creating. Customized goat creates 2 pods. Now let's get rid of this. And it's starting up. So essentially it's working, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve. All right, I'm going to jump back over to here. Once again, my name is Steve Giguere. I'm a developer advocate for Bridgecrew. Installing an admission controller is super easy. Configuring it is super easy. And I hope you like that. This has been a demonstration of Zero to Hero, the new Checkov powered Kubernetes admission controller, validating admission controller. That's the end. Steve out.